Welcome to the Coach's Idea podcast. I'm your host,
I'ma bring change, even if I gotta do it 2 cents at a time. I feel too much pain, so don't you dare try to tell me everything's fine. I'ma bring change, even if I gotta do it 2 cents at a time. I feel too much pain, yeah. So I'ma bring change, yeah, and still I see no change, like Pac said. So that's what I'ma try to bring before I drop dead. I won't stop till everybody gets truly free, till every poor kid in the street got food to eat, till every bullet is taking out every gun. The love starts with you and me. We need unity, y'all, cause the streets at war like the Middle East, and only hypocrites kill for peace. So
Marvin Okello. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which the Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic's office and training facility is located is the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The meaning behind the IDEA acronym is inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility in both physical and financial aspects. The podcast purpose is to share the stories from the many diverse coaches across Atlantic Canada and their experiences in hopes that others can learn from them. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Dave Green, who's not only like a friend, a brother to me, a coworker at Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic, along with FUNSports, a business partner, ally, a community leader, and a DI specialist, which, in my opinion, not enough white men who are doing great work in the space get enough credit, and Dave is one of those people. So I really want to give a shout out to Dave Green, and welcome today, Dave. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me, Marvin. Pleasure to do this podcast with you.
Definitely. I mean, it's long overdue.
Well, you haven't been doing it that long, so I think I'm second or third one. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I just mean even between the other podcasts that I had with the Wanderers as well, and now here, I'm surprised that we've never done a podcast together. So I'm really glad that I get to highlight your very cool experiences and your very unique story. And there's also a lot of overlaps, as a lot of people know, but I'm really excited to dive into so many similarities in our lives and our sporting journeys that have led us to really doing some great work in the community together with the youth.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to the next hour or so that we're going to talk. We do have a very unique path, you and I, to when we have met and what we're doing right now. And it's going to be fun.
Definitely. And where can you tell us, where are you right now at the time of recording?
So it's I'm in Chula Vista, California, which is about 45 minutes south of San Diego. It's literally on the Mexico border, Tijuana, Mexico. I can see it from my apartment window. And I'm with the Canadian Canoe Kayak team. We're currently training for World Cups that are going to happen in Hungary in May. And obviously, this is an Olympic year, so we're the big goal is to pick our team for Paris, the Paris Olympics, which of course are going to take place in late July, early August. So we're a very busy time for anybody trying to qualify spots in the Olympics right now. So that's what I'm doing, and it's just a beautiful location on a lake, and mountains are around us. It's So I think you guys had like snow a couple days ago.
Yeah, we did, even just yesterday. And I mean, luckily it didn't stick very long because it's decently warm. But I'm definitely jealous that I'm not in California down there with you guys.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic training facility, and feel very blessed to be here. We've had other training camps in other parts of the U.S. and Canada, and I'm not going to lie, this is by far my favorite. It's a great spot.
That's awesome. Well, before we kind of work backwards into how you got started in sport and everything, a few questions that I like to ask every guest is, we'll start with your favorite moment as an athlete.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I guess like a personal thing. I just always comes back to probably tennis was probably the sport that I excelled in the most. So as a 15-year-old, I remember winning provincials in Newfoundland. That was kind of a really big deal, and that was it was a highlight, I guess, as an athlete. And that was, again, as a 15-year-old. And then I guess fast forward 20 years later, I hadn't played a lot of tennis for a while, and I found myself in Yellowknife, of all places, Northwest Territories, as an instructor. and I hadn't played in tournaments in years, instructed, and I ended up winning the provincial title in the Northwest Territories Provincial Open. So they were probably two of my highlights as an athlete. They were, just anytime you win anything, I guess in an individual sport, it's kind of cool. That was so yeah. So I had a provincial title in Newfoundland and the Northwest Territories. So I guess that's my
Wow.
favorite moment as an athlete for myself. Yeah.
That's definitely unique. And what was it like being in the Northwest Territories?
Northwest Territories is just an absolutely beautiful place in the world. Now, I was there. I remember the dates exactly. It was June 19th, 2006 to June 19th or August 19th, the same year. So I was there 2 months total, 9 weeks. And I got there so June 19th, 2 days before summer solstice. And of course, it basically doesn't get dark. You're so far north on the latitude scale. So yeah, like the summer, the whole community just comes so much alive in that very short window of summer. So, people are golfing at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, playing tennis, paddling community that they have there, soccer, all that. So people just try to get as much summer in as possible in that short window. So I just remember how active I was and the community was. And yeah, just an incredible place to spend summer. Uh, what I do remember is, again, I left. I think and I think I know it was his 19th of August. Leading up to that, like the 10th of August, 11th, 12th. I remember the leaves were falling off the trees and fall was settling in real soon. So I was like, yeah, it's probably time to go. I'm not much of a winter person, but highly recommend anybody that likes fishing in the outdoors. There's a lot of good fishing and stuff. Yeah, and the culture was great. A lot of First Nations people in the Yellowknife area. I remember we did some tennis events on some reserves and whatnot. It was a really incredible experience. It's a unique part of the country. Canada's a big place, and not a lot of people get this experience at North. So yeah, it was very cool.
Exactly. And that's why I just wanted to hear a little bit about it because I've definitely never been to the Northwest Territories.
Yeah.
So the next one is your favorite sports moment, but as a fan. So your favorite sports moment as a fan, Dave. That would be the next one. And could be, being at the Olympics. It could be watching something on TV. It could be anything, really.
Yeah, goodness. It got me here, Marvin. I'm trying to think. As a fan, I mean, the Kawhi Leonard sinking the shot for the Raptors in 2019 was a really big one, and I loved that. I wouldn't say it was my favorite. Honestly, I would think I'll try to make a long story short. 1984, big hockey fan. Edmonton Oilers are in the finals, and obviously everybody remembers Wayne Gretzky. Number 99. Every kid in Canada is wearing a 99 jersey. But Mark Messier was my favorite player. He was kind of like second fiddle to Gretzky. And the Oilers won their first cup. And of course, I grew up in Newfoundland. The games are coming on at like whatever it was, about 9:30. So it's, I'm in grade 6, and I fall asleep on the couch. And I remember my mom waking me up because she knew how much I wanted to see Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, and my idols walk around, or skate around the ice with the Stanley Cup. And I got to met Mark Messier in a hockey school earlier in that year, or I guess in the summer of '83, and I was a kid that wore a number 11 jersey. And of course, every other kid at the school had a number 99 Gretzky jersey. So I was Mark Messier's little buddy for a week in his hockey school doing passing drills with him. He's like, "Oh, this kid's got number 11 on." And it was like an iron-on, it was Oilers jersey with an iron-on 11 on the back. It was pretty ghetto jersey, but it got the point across that I was a big fan. So anyway, the Oilers win the Stanley Cup. Mark Messier wins the Conn Smythe Trophy, which is the MVP of the playoffs, not Wayne Gretzky. So anyone that would listen to me would say, "Hey, I told you Mark Messier was better than Gretzky. He's my boy." And I just could not. Mom could not get that jersey off my back for the entirety of grade 6, basically, because I just wanted to wear it every day. So waking up and seeing Mark Messier and my idols walk around with the Stanley Cup was definitely, I would think, as a kid and watching something on TV, something I'll never forget. That was cool. Because, of course, back in the day, no TSN. That was just before TSN came on the air. So if you didn't see it live, you really didn't see it.
No you didn't have social media. You didn't have the Instagram.
Yeah, that was it. You see the picture in the paper a couple of days later, and you might be lucky enough to see it on the Hockey Night in Canada the following fall when they would have showed highlights. I mean, it was kind of aging myself by saying all that, but that's the truth. You didn't see it happen live. You didn't see it really, right?
for sure. And you mentioned Wayne Gretzky there too. One of my biggest regrets is when I moved to Canada, I got a rookie card, Wayne Gretzky, that I then gifted to a friend, and I definitely regret that. That would be worth a lot right now.
Yeah, you probably won't be working. You probably have a different job, actually. Yeah, it's insanity, the hockey cards, what they're worth right now to what they were, because everybody has a classic story. My age, they had the Wayne Gretzky rookie cards, and they used to put them in the spike or spokes in the bikes just to make noise, or kind of meant to put on the little card games or whatnot. But yeah, if we only knew what we had, hey.
Exactly. And so the last one for you, and I know you probably have a lot of these, is just the favorite coaching moment. One of
Yeah,
mine was interacting with a kid, a kid who asked me about why am I black and why is he white. That's one of my most just innocent moments, but also a learning moment that was just, it's a very wholesome moment for me.
yeah, I've definitely got a few, but definitely my favorite was actually kind of a very unique moment. So it goes back to 2017, and I was coaching U10 softball boys team from Highland Park, of course, in the north end of Halifax. And I had coached that team. That was the fourth, or I guess it was the fifth year I had actually had those kids. And the first couple of years, we were a younger team, and they were getting beat pretty bad by other teams in the province, and we just didn't do well. But by the time most of the kids were 8 or 9 years old, we had a really good team, and they had gelled well together. They had good batting. We had a good batting order, good defense. We were just a good team. And unfortunately for the provincials, I had to miss it because it was my first trip between Canada with Canoe Kayak Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's nothing I could do. It was an international event. I really had to go. A big opportunity for me. So I actually missed the provincials. But the parents, still to this day, can't believe what they did. So they were like, you don't have to miss anything. What we'll do is we'll set up cameras, and you can still coach from the bench, and we'll have a camera behind home plate. And as long as you can, with the time difference, I was in the Czech Republic, you can watch the games. I was like, well, okay, that sounds cool. Yeah, right. So, talk about how great technology can be. So I was literally in my hotel room in Prague doing treatments with the athletes, because I work as a massage therapist. And with the time difference, actually, I wasn't doing a lot of treatments. I was just in my hotel room, coaching the guys, from Prague, and they were playing at Dartmouth and Halifax. And anyway, we won the U10 provincial tournament, and they had the laptop there. They jumped around just like how you go up and down when you win, and they put a medal around one of the parents' necks. Was kind of like who was doing the FaceTime with me. Mm-hmm. And I was in Prague. I was crying, to be perfectly honest with you. I was like, oh my God, after 5 years being with this team, we finally won. It's sad I wasn't there, but I felt like I was, because I really didn't miss a pitch the entire weekend. And I coached with the assistant coaches. They had me on the bench. It was extremely cool. So I'll never forget that. So then when I got back from Prague, we had a team party, and we celebrated with under 10 kids. So we had the sparkling water and the root beer and the pizza, and it was super fun. Yeah, so I'll never forget that weekend as long as I live. I never will. That was amazing.
That's incredible. That's like the epitome of accessibility. They really made sure that you could still, be involved.
Yeah, it was very special. It really was.
That's awesome. Well, Dave, I'd like to hear a little bit about, we'll give the summary version of how you've gotten into this role, and then we'll dive into it into a bit more depth. But what is the short version of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. So I guess the short version. You can't. You try to make it as short as possible, but it always starts with your childhood. So I grew up in central Newfoundland, a community called Grand Falls, Windsor. Still, very close to the people in that community today. But for a small town, we had a lot of sports. So I was very fortunate to be able to play a variety of things. So I played minor hockey, minor baseball, tennis, and then of course, getting high school, a bit of basketball, a little volleyball, and soccer. So I was very fortunate to grow up in a community that we had access to a lot of different sports. and I enjoyed everything. So that's kind of my childhood. Never really concentrated on one thing. I was the kid who was like, okay, every couple of months I get bored with something. I was like, okay, let's go play tennis now. Let's go play baseball. Okay, hockey's coming up. So yeah, I was always very much into, and I think socially I was good. You're always around different people, and it kind of paves the way for how your life is going to be. So once I graduated high school, I just kind of knew that sports was something that I wanted to stay involved with. And so I ended up going to Dalhousie doing a recreation management degree, which is a lot like a sports management degree. And with that, I scored a really cool internship. I ended up spending 6 months with the Pittsburgh Penguins in the NHL as a sales marketing intern, and which actually turned into a job for a couple of months. And they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. People
Wow.
probably remember that. The hockey fans, that was like in 1998. Look, Mario Lemieux came in and saved the franchise. If you're old enough, you would remember that.
Yeah.
And so I ended up leaving Pittsburgh, coming back to Newfoundland because I just graduated my recreation degree at Dalhousie, and I found myself back in my hometown of Grand Falls, Windsor, and I remember running into Rex Burns, who was the president of the tennis club and at the mayor of the town at the time. And he was like, "Hey man, would you like to run the tennis program this summer?" And I was like, "Okay, geez, Rex, it's been 10 years since I even played." But anyway, I ended up doing my tennis instructor levels course and passing it, and all of a sudden I was a tennis instructor, and I just fell in love with coaching again. I hadn't coached in quite a while, and so that was my work in the summertime, and I was really inspired by Ross Robley Gotti in 1998, watching the Nagano Olympics. He was a Canadian snowboarder. So I went out to White Hills, Clarenville, Newfoundland, and I did some snowboarding. And before I knew it, I was a snowboard instructor. So I did both of those things for a number of years, where I teach tennis in the summertime and snowboarding in the winter. And so that was kind of my coaching career for a while. And But you get into your 30s, you can't be a tennis instructor or a snowboard instructor forever. You kind of think of it, this is a lot of fun, but
Yeah.
the money's not fantastic, and the stability of it, and you're not getting younger, et cetera, et cetera. So I decided to go back to school, and I became a massage therapist. And with that, I had made a lot of connections in the sporting world. I ended up getting an internship with the Montreal Canadiens. Met this guy who's really one of my mentors, Nick Adijib. He was the athletic therapist with the St. John's Maple Leafs, which was Toronto's farm team in Newfoundland. And so anyway, Nick moved from the Maple Leafs organization to the Montreal Canadiens organization. So I did my massage course, and of course, having the Montreal Canadiens on your resume as a therapist really opened up an enormous amount of doors. So that was just an amazing experience, just a couple of weeks with those guys, which led to a lot of work in the hockey world. But of course, I never did move to Montreal. I had some roots planted in Halifax by this time. And so all the local sports teams in Halifax, I would have had something to do with that over the years. We had the Halifax Raymond, Hurricanes. Of course, I met you through the Wanderers and the Lacrosse Thunderbirds. And I guess it was it's way back. 2013, I started work at Cove Sport Therapy with Shelley Malcolm Beasley. She's the owner of the clinic there, and she had a contract with Canoe Kayak Canada. And of course, I had no idea that sprint canoe was even a thing, to be perfectly honest with you.
Me neither until I met you.
Yeah, exactly. And you've lived in Nova Scotia for better part of 20 years now, right?
Yeah.
So I drive by Lake Binook and I'd see people paddling out there, and I call it rowing, which now I know is like not a thing to do. There's a big difference. Rowing, you go backwards; paddling is canoeing, and kayaking, you go forwards. But anyway, I had very little knowledge of the sport, and before you know it, I'm treating Olympic athletes in canoe sprint at Shelley's clinic on Lake Binook. And fast forward. God, it's hard to believe. 11 years later, I've been working full time with these guys now for 6 or 7 years, and literally traveled around the world with the canoe kayak team. And I absolutely love it. It's my family away from my family, and the highlight, of course, is I got to go to the Tokyo Olympics in 2020, but it was 2021, of course, and here we are, present day, getting ready to go to Paris in less than 6 months. So that's that's my long story, as short as I can make it, I guess.
No, it's an incredible one, honestly. And
Yeah.
I'm sure we're going to dive into individual parts of you being in Newfoundland and things that inspired you to eventually launch Fun Sports. But that's one that I'm really curious to share about. What was the moment that led you to creating Fun Sports? Because obviously you enjoy working with youth. There's some overlaps in your life with youth being involved, that weren't your kids, that obviously end up taking care of. But how did you end up starting Fun Sports?
Well, I'll backtrack a little bit. Fun Sports, we incorporated in June of 2019, but the idea of helping kids access sport has actually been something that I've thought about a very long time. And I'll go back to 1998, being in Pittsburgh. I kind of had an epiphany, if you would, back then. So I'm walking to work every day. I actually lived in the inner city, and I just see a lot of kids playing basketball, and I was like, okay, these kids just they play basketball, and that's about it. And on the way to work, I would see a lot of homeless people, panhandling, looking for money and stuff. And I get into my office, and I have a suit and a laptop, and I open it up. And ultimately, my job was to try to make millionaires more money. And I was like, I don't really know if I really like doing this. There's a lot of people around me that could use your services more. And I remember distinctly going to the Penguins. This is not the dog, the Penguins or anything, but things have changed since 1998. And I went to them with the idea of starting a ball hockey program in the inner city.
Mm.
I was laughed right out of the office.
Wow.
And of course, nowadays, everybody's, EDI wasn't even a thing back then. It was just, whatever. People just did their own thing. Nobody was concerned with inner city kids or inclusion or whatnot. So always, the thing is, it's been something I've been thinking about a very long time. And then, of course, like I talked earlier about being in Yellowknife, I made sure that made sure is the right way to put it. But I remember talking to the people at the tennis club, going, I'd like to do some stuff on the res with the First Nation kids and go to the reses and whatnot. And they were like, okay, cool. So it's trying to make sports accessible was always kind of a passion of mine. We even brought the prisoners in to do a tennis day, which again, I remember getting some backlash about that. They're like, you want to do what? I was like, well, these guys need recreation too. Why don't we bring them into the tennis club? And they were like, okay, sure, whatever you think, but hopefully nothing bad will happen. But so it's kind of been a passion of mine for a long time to try to make sports accessible for as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, where I really started to make the move was my nephews, Jaden and Caden. Of course, you spent a lot of time with the boys over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
They experienced a lot of barriers at a young age. They come from public housing down in the Emo Lane area, and they, just not a lot of disposable income in the family. Their parents were very young when they had them; they were just teenagers themselves. So, as they say, it's sometimes takes a village to raise kids. So the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents, they all get involved. And for me, I had built a lot of connections in the city through my massage therapy career, like I said, we mentioned the Wanderers, the Thunderbirds, the Mooseheads, and anything else I was involved in the city. So, I had a lot of channels, I guess. So what I would do is got the boys involved basically in everything that I had access to, which, my main three sports would have been hockey, so the Black Youth Ice Hockey program with Dean Smith and those guys. I think you've talked to Dean probably recently.
Yeah.
And then it was John Wayne Madison, of course, that you just did a session with a couple of days ago at Needham Center. And he's been running the Highland Park softball program for years. So the boys were doing softball. And like I said, the sport that I had most access to was tennis. So I started doing some stuff with Tennis Nova Scotia and Tennis Canada that the boys were involved with. And these were things that we get a discount on when it came to registration if I was coaching or whatnot. And then just realized there was just a lot of kids in the boys' neighborhood that were facing the same financial barriers. That whether it would be transportation or money to get to these things. So all of a sudden, it was just not my two nephews. It was a third kid, a fourth kid, a fifth kid, and I was like, oh God, okay, like this is getting beyond me right now at this point. So I remember going to Nick Williams at the Needham Center. He's been running the Needham Center for quite a period of time. And I said, I just want to do a program for kids for free. If we can get the gym time for free, that'd be fantastic. And he was all about it. He said, yeah, if you're going to do a program that's going to be free for kids, and you're going to make it your target market basically for kids that have barriers in sport, and we'll give you the gym for free. And then I just started calling in favors from, whether it be LA Blackwood Gymnastics or the Hurricanes or the Mooseheads or whatever. And it was the evolution of FUNSports. We just, kept doing programs at the Needham Center and calling in favors from my athletes, whether it be the paddlers or, again, people like you that I met over the last couple of years. And now here we are. It's a full-on organization that it does all kinds of events. So yeah, that's kind of how it all started.
That's an amazing story. And, for me, it's always interesting hearing that others helped you be able to access sport when you couldn't travel and all that. And now you're also kind of going full circle and you're creating access for youth and other people to be able to access things and removing barriers. I do want to give a quick shout out to Nick Williams at the Needham Center. He does some great work there with that building and making sure that there's programs that are really engaging with the youth. Also want to give a shout out to Sabrina over at Mulgrave Park there. She does a lot of work with the kids, and anyone who works with kids knows that it's there's good days, there's bad days, there's a lot of headaches sometimes, but she deals with it all and she shows up and makes sure that she facilitates the kids being able to go and participate in sport and do Christmas parties and everything. So big shout out to Sabrina over at Mulgrave Park for what she does there for the kids.
Yeah, they just do a lot of good work. I mean, it's not just sports, obviously. As you know, I think they had an author in the other day, so they do, educational stuff. They do artistic stuff. They get kids to events, and now at FUNSports, the kids have access to a few more sports. So they're just doing some really good work in that community.
Absolutely.
But I was wondering if we could switch the tables around a little bit here right for the next little while, if you're comfortable with that. I was just going to ask you a little bit, I'd like to know your sports story and kind of what led you to do some EDI work and, your experience as a coach and kind of what you're doing right now, if you're cool with that.
Definitely. No, I've definitely had a few people reach out and say, you're always interviewing people and it's great to hear all their stories, but you as the host, we don't really know your story. So I'd definitely be happy to share a little bit about me.
I think it's important. It's important for people to know, the Marvin Okello story ultimately, because again, they're tuning in, and we need to know your resume, Marvin. So let's hear it.
For sure. So no, as a lot of people, because I sound like I'm Canadianized, at this point, I don't have much of an accent or anything. A lot of people don't know that I was actually born in Kenya. Me and my three sisters, mom and dad, were born and raised there. Well, my mom and dad were actually from Uganda. And my dad actually had worked for the government prior to Idi Amin. So unfortunately, he was on that hit list of people who were, unfortunately, he's trying to get rid of. So my father and mother and my oldest sister, Emma, who was the only one of the kids who was born in Uganda, all fled to Kenya after, my dad went into hiding for many months at a time, just trying to make sure that he could, stay safe and protect the family at the same time. So
were you old enough at this point to realize what was going on, or was it kind of?
I wasn't in the picture at this point. This is in Uganda.
Gotcha.
So
my bad.
No worries. So it's my mom, dad, and just my oldest sister Emma, who was born there. And before she even turned 2, things got crazy, and they end up having to flee to Kenya. And once they got to Kenya, they got set up there. Both my parents very academic, so they were able to get jobs very quickly, and grew up in the farm life and And so my early days were spent, working with, animals and out in the fields and, really playing out in the wilderness, because I was fortunate enough that my parents really were able to homeschool us. So I was able to really spend a lot of time playing soccer with other kids. My parents would go and teach, and they thought that I was at home doing yard work and all that, but I would go and play soccer with the kids who were all skipping school, and so because of that, I was able to get really good at soccer at a young age because I was playing with kids who were 2, 3, 4, 5 years older than me, and really that's where I grew that appetite for soccer and that love for soccer, which has carried me to this day, and it's something that'll always be a part of me. But it was things weren't always good. We ended up in a refugee camp, unfortunately, and civil war was happening, and there was bandits at a number of checkpoints, and they'd ask you to give them money, or they'd take your children, they'd do things to the females, unfortunately, and so we ended up in a refugee camp. Myself, my three sisters at this point. Uh, I was third born, so there was my sister Emma, who was born in Uganda, then my sister Donna, who was born once we were in Kenya, myself, and my younger sister Diana, who were all separated basically by 2 years. Um, so we're all very close, as you can imagine. Going through things like living in a refugee camp, you really get to appreciate family and those things that people take for granted. Just your next meal. Nothing really was ever guaranteed. So I have a very serious appreciation for the smaller things in life, and a lot of people who know me hear me say the quote, first world problems a lot, because
Yes, of course.
in Canada and North America and Europe and a lot of places, we sometimes get so in our own heads we don't realize that some of our problems are problems that people would pray to have, you know.
No doubt. We don't
So
understand. Yeah.
exactly. And it's sometimes it's hard without the context and without living those other experiences, but that's where empathy and sympathy really play a big part in trying to understand other people without living what they've lived through. But in 96, our family, through many lucky turn of events, but also I'm a man of faith. I grew up in the Christian background, so I think that God really was with us, and we were able to get to Canada through this missionary family, the Carlines, who are now not like family. They are family to me. They helped us get to Fredericton, New Brunswick. They're based out of Hampton, New Brunswick, which is not too far. So they set us up with a church who sponsored us, and for people who don't know, there's a large cost when you're a refugee coming into a country, and I can't remember the exact amount, but I think it's around 10K that you have to pay to be able to come into the country as a refugee at the time. I don't know if that number's increased with inflation or anything, but it's on top of already leaving everything you have, your clothes and everything. You also have to pay to go into another country to start fresh. And I understand the premise of it, but these are the barriers that a lot of people don't understand when they say things like, immigrants are coming to take our jobs and whatnot. It's like, no, they're just going somewhere where they can be safe, where they can
Yeah, exactly.
have a bed
That's
over.
that is a big cost. It really is.
It is, and so the first few years were tough for my parents. They had to take on multiple jobs. They both went back to university because a lot of university international degrees aren't recognized, unfortunately, which is another barrier that people face, where they've spent tens of $1,000s on formal educations, and then they arrive here and they're told, we don't recognize it. You got to do it again. On top of the 10K or plus whatever international students pay, double tuition, yada yada, and so my parents really are founded that work ethic in me that a lot of people know I have to this day. So English wasn't my first language, like many would assume, because of how fluent I am in it. But Swahili was the main language I spoke until we moved to Canada in 96 and lived in Fredericton. It was tough making friends because it's a whole different culture, but this is where sports has always been such, playground, how the playground is. There's when you're playing soccer, you're playing wall ball or whatever, there's always teams that are picked. And because I was always very athletic, very fast, very, I was always chosen. So because of that, I was able to make friends very quickly, which allowed me to really um, grow the social aspect of myself, and I'm lucky in that sense that I was good at sports. There's so many people who aren't good at sports, they aren't athletic, they're the last to get picked, and it deflates them, and it hurts their self-esteem. But I didn't have that because I was good at sports. So I always um, count my blessings that I was given those gifts. And
Socially, it can really help you, obviously.
yeah, exactly. And it really helped me socially. But, that doesn't mean that I didn't face my fair share of bullying, and there's the famous story of me pulling the fire alarm because these kids that I thought were my friends, asked me to go, and they said it was an initiation thing that had to be done. And so I went, and with my basic English that I was learning, I saw the word pull. So I pulled it, and next thing you know, I got ink all over me, the fire alarm's going off, everything's crazy. And the principal comes over, and knew me as a good kid. Was like, "Hey, what's going on?" I told him, I was crying and saying, "These kids told me to do it. They said it was initiation. I thought they were my friends." And so unfortunately, as much as sports allowed me to make friends, sometimes it wasn't always the right kids, and I had to learn you know to protect myself and not assume that everyone is nice. Unfortunately, especially with kids can be really cruel. But no, sports and soccer specifically allowed me to really grow. I played with FDSA, Fredericton District Association, with Ken Morrison, who actually works at Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic in New Brunswick there. Um, we
You
end
can't
up
go
having,
way back. I had no idea.
yeah, I've known Ken Morrison since way, way back in 90, probably him, 97, 90. No, I'd played Timbits for the first couple of years. So 99 to 2001, I would have known Ken playing on the same team there.
Super
So
cool.
yeah, and he's a strength and performance coach for Canadian Sport Institute Atlantic. But I moved to Nova Scotia after my parents both got jobs that required them to move to Halifax, and we moved to Lower Sackville, which is a very interesting community. Um, to say the least, because going from Fredericton, where you know there's really nobody who did drugs at the middle school that I was at. I went to Albert Street Middle School, which doesn't exist anymore, um, and then moving to AJ Smeltzer Junior High, where I remember my very first day of school and walking, and I'm smelling this weird smell that I'd never smelled before, and I had to ask somebody, "What is this? What is this smell that like is all over the air?" And they're like, "You mean weed?" I was
What the hell is
like,
weed?
what is that? Like,
Right.
because even in Kenya, it's not something that I was exposed to. So they're like, yeah, it's just like weed. Yeah, there's kids that smoke it. It's a thing. Like it's illegal, but like it is what it is. Uh, so I end up again, kind of the first friends that I made through sports were, sometimes those bad kids that quote unquote the troubled kids.
Mhm.
So I ended up, in those situations where you're with these kids who are, shoplifting, and you're kind of looking around like, I don't want to wait, like what's going on? Like, I don't want to be associated with these kids, especially as a little black kid. Like, it's very easy to be the one who ends up getting in trouble when all the white kids are, getting away with it because they're not as visible, and they're not being looked at for theft because of stigmas in society, right?
Racially
So
profiled in lots of places in rural Canada. There's no doubt about it. Black people, that is.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And so there were some negative influences there because of the nature of being the new kid in school. And sometimes, as much as those troubled kids get a bad name, sometimes they're the most welcoming, because
Sure.
they, they want to feel out anybody new and figure out maybe can they belong in my group or whatever. So everywhere as I went, it was ironic that I always ended up kind of dealing with those athletic kids first, who were kind of the bad seeds, and then I would find my way to the more um, academic kids, and the ones who were playing on the sports teams that were also the popular kids or whatever. And they would kind of say, steer away from those guys, like they're going to get you in trouble once they kind of started to see me on the soccer team, the basketball team, the volleyball team, etc. But I did unfortunately experience, a number of instances of racism playing sport. from a young age, I had kids calling me the monkey, calling me all these things. And, there's moments where I didn't want to go to my next soccer practice. I didn't want to go, and my parents would tell me, Marvin, you're really good at soccer, and life's going to be full of people who are going to say things, they're going to do things, but how you deal with it is really what's going to show your character and how you respond to it and the adversity. So, I got to give a big shout out to my mom and dad for always teaching me to push through, to still show up every day, and to put my best foot forward. So
If you don't
because
mind
of
me, sorry, I was sorry to cut you off. I'm just curious, of course, this is not, Jackie Robinson in the 1940s. This is Marvin Okello in Canada in the 90s and early 2000s even.
yeah,
I'm just curious, like, coaches and safe sport is a big thing now, and I just did a course in racism in sport. Did you just have to deal with that yourself and within your family, or did you have coaches or administrators that would address those things, or was it kind of swept under the rug even just 15, 20 years ago?
swept
Or
under the rug, unfortunately. It was more of me and my mom and dad, and sometimes maybe I'd tell a teacher, but unfortunately, there was no processes in place to punish the kids or even to have a restorative processes like things we talk about now, not just banning people or suspending them or expelling them, but actually teaching them about what they did was wrong, and I'll give an example is grade 10 in one of our in English class we did one of those like mixers where you get to know your classmates. And in theory, the idea was good from the teacher, where we had the little cue cards with the striped lines on them, and you have space to you're supposed to write the first thing that came to mind when you meet somebody new in the class. So really nice hair, cool backpack, I like your shoes. Those
right.
types of things were the general norm that most kids wrote.
Mhm.
But for me, unfortunately, and one of my friends, a kid who lived on my street, pointed out, Marvin, like, you're gonna have to go talk to the teacher because it was on my back, so you couldn't see it. You just walked around, and people would write it on people's backs and go, and you go to the next one, and so forth. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I remember reaching over and pulling it off of my back, and I opened it and immediately started crying because somebody had wrote the word coon on my back.
Wow.
And this
Wow.
is this is in grade 10, so that was a horrible moment for me. That one wasn't in sport, that was in school. But it was really, really, really painful. As a new person in this community, I hadn't only been there for 3 years, moved in grade 7, and now we're in a brand new school, the big Sackville High
Mhm.
School, full of 1,600 students. And for me, I was so excited to go to the big school and stuff, and
Of
this was
course.
the second day of school, that this happened. And
That's a
I
lot.
almost it was crazy. It was crazy. And I remember the teacher, when I went and told her, she was shocked. And she was one of my favorite teachers that I've ever had. But um, so I was told to go to the principal's office to kind of tell them what had happened. And eventually they brought the kid they found who had written it. And the saddest part about it was a kid who lived on my street and we played together. Like
Wow.
we skateboarded together,
Mhm.
we rode the bus together, and I thought he was in my friend's girl, and I thought he was, my friend. And this is the second time in my life where I'm like, somebody who I think is my friend is really
He
not.
crushed you.
And the word coon is a very, very hateful word.
Of course.
And without getting into the history of it, it's holds significant weight as the N word, and at a young age, I understood the hate behind the word more than anything, more than the merit, and it really put a lot of stress on my willingness to go to school, my
Of course.
ability, my willingness to make new friends, my willingness to even just be vulnerable with people anymore. So for a few years, I was really closed off. I was very um, introverted, let's say, because normally I'm a social butterfly, but I don't think anybody can really blame me after having such things happen.
What trigger
People
wings?
calling me monkey on the soccer field, kids putting coon on my back in English class, like, and these are the things that, immigrants and people of color and, minorities experience that people just have no idea. And it's like you said, people think that like this ended with the Jackie Robinsons and the Martin Luther Kings
Mhm.
but these things happen every day in our backyards, and that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do. But fast forward, there's a story obviously of me at the national soccer championship having the N word said to me again, and I've talked about that in detail in previous podcasts. Um, so I have had a number of racist experiences, unfortunately, during sport. And for that reason, I really am a strong advocate for anti-racism and for education around even things like safe sport, which will be a big topic on our next episode with Nicole Kuzmich and Simon Taylor. But I have all of those lived experiences that you always hear people talk about. My unfortunately, even now, one of them, my parents are divorcing because of trauma that my father had to deal with. As I told you, he was basically headhunted in Uganda, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
trauma and PTSD associated with that he hasn't unfortunately been able to deal with because, like a lot of men, they don't believe in therapy, and unfortunately he's one of those because he was raised in the generation where you man up and you put the food on the table, you're a breadwinner and you don't talk about your emotions, and it's you're a wuss if you're talking about your emotions and all that. And so me and my dad are very different in that sense. I'm a sensitive guy. I'm emotional. I cry with my friends. I tell my guy friends I love them all the time, like yourself, Dave.
Yeah, totally you
And
do.
and I really make sure that the youth that I work with, both the guys that I coach, my nephews, just young guys that I mentor in the community, that they're talking about their emotions. They're talking with their fathers specifically about their emotions and asking how their dads are doing, and trying to give them space to talk about their feelings and whatnot, because ultimately sports um, can be an escape from a lot of things, and for me, that was no different. My dad would come to watch me at soccer, and it was the one space where we had something in common, and we didn't have to worry about all those other nasty parts of life. Where I excelled on the field, I was always one of the best. My dad coached me for the first couple of years we were in Fredericton, and it was that thing that we had together that was really fun and removed from society. um, so for me, soccer has always been
A
a
safe
place
place.
where
Yeah.
a safe place, and
Yeah.
that's why for me it's really important to continue um, creating those safe spaces in sport for kids, for people to just be able to have fun, and that's why I really like the name FUNSports, even though it stands for fun and underprivileged neighborhoods, underrepresented neighborhoods. So yeah, so for me, I have a lot of those lived experiences right from my right from the refugee camp, right from Fredericton, in soccer in grade 10, everywhere. I've had racism. I've had police pulled me over. I've been you know
This is
I've been
why I
profiled.
think the current job you have as the DEI coach, I've said this many times. I don't think the CSI line could find a better person than you because of the experiences and the individual that you are. So, yeah, I just think they're extremely lucky to have you. 'Cause your life is your life experiences alone make you qualify for the job, let alone what you've done as a coach and an athlete. So,
Thank you. And I mean, the other part of it is playing on provincial teams, playing on Canada Games teams, which I was lucky enough to be able to play when we moved to Nova Scotia on the U14 provincial team right away, right through U15, U16 Canada Games. Most of the time, I was the only Black athlete. I was the only Black player on the team. And this is something that Keisha Turner will be talking about at the Atlantic Coaching Conference in her first session about being the only. And it's lonely. It's like
of
in work
course.
we talk about sometimes some roles are very siloed. Sports can be like that too if there isn't a lot of representation, and that's why one of the roles that I have as the DI coaching lead is to increase the number of diverse coaches, and that's something I'm very passionate about because representation matters right from the youth all the way to coaches and adulthood, because if you don't see people who look like you, how can people even understand you? Like I had coaches who'd ask me questions about my heritage and how they can support me, and I really appreciated it because I did feel like nobody understood my situation, and
Yeah,
and and without having other kids that I could relate to, talk about those home life situations, and are you immigrants? Are you it did feel lonely at times in sports, and I do feel like if there was other black kids, other minorities, that I actually think I would have done even better in sport than I did because I
I'm
would have
sure you
had
probably would
those
have.
people to kind of feel even more comfortable then, because sometimes it took a while to make friends on sports teams because I was always the different kid. I didn't. I luckily I'm good at making friends, and I eventually overcame that just with my own adversity and my own social butterfly skills. But it was definitely always tough being the only black player on the team a lot of times. But no, so I mean that's the long story short in terms
Right.
of the barriers that I've gone through, even in the continued right through university and stuff. But the big thing that I always tell people about my experiences, and kind of summarized with my faith. I don't ask God for a lighter load. I ask for a stronger back, because
Love that
things are going
quote.
to continue to happen, and regardless of who you are, things are going to happen in your life. But it's how you deal with them that really shapes your character and your legacy.
And you have a strong back.
Yeah, a few weeks ago it didn't feel so strong when I
It's getting
considered
stronger all the
where,
time.
but no, metaphorically and literally, I definitely have learned to have a strong back. So no, thank you, Dave, for asking me about my story and giving me an
Uh,
opportunity to share that.
it's important for people to know.
Definitely. So, I mean, with that being said, we have a lot of um, similarities. I didn't really talk about the other sports that I played, and soccer is the main one, but I did play in junior high on my volleyball team, basketball team, badminton team. I really excelled in badminton, provincial championships all the way grade 8 through grade 12, because Sackville High was a real dynasty when it comes to badminton. I played tennis, but not competitively because there was no programs competitively in junior high or high school, unfortunately, for me to be able to test myself against other kids. But I played against some friends who played on the circuit because
Mhm.
they had the money and their parents, that was their sport, so they played it, and I would beat them, like we're
You,
talking
you can
big.
play. I've seen you play. You can play for a guy that's never had any proper training.
Exactly. So it's a big part of why when I heard about your fun sports program, I really wanted to be involved because I thrive in many sport environments because I was lucky enough to be able to have exposure to them through different friends and community, whether it's neighbors or YMCA programs, which were always something that my parents put us into right from Fredericton. Um, and being able to try, I actually excelled in a lot of them and went quite far, but never like, to a provincial level or anything because soccer ultimately was my number one sport. But all playing all those sports made me better at soccer.
Yeah, I mean, this is a discussion you and I have had before, and I've had with numerous people and coaches throughout the country. Is um, I firmly believe that playing numerous amount of sports just makes you a better athlete overall. And if you just have one sport, you can't go to Olympics or play professional. You can't do three or four things. That's just impossible. But um, by the time you're 15 or 16 years old, you kind of narrow things down. You become a paddler, you become a soccer player, you focus on tennis or hockey. But I think up until about age 12 or 13, I think kids should be playing at least three different things. And if a kid between the ages of 4 and 10 is exposed to 10 or 12 different sports, that's 10 or 12 social networks that they see. Plus the transferable skills they have, say from hockey to soccer to tennis to baseball, all of a sudden. And two great examples that I'm working with here this week is Connor Fitzpatrick and Katie Vincent. I mean, they're just the top paddler. Katie's probably the top paddler in the entire world right now, and Connor is one of the best. and they played everything just like you and I did. But at the end of the day, the balance, the strength, and all of those things it takes to balance a canoe and make it go fast, the cardio, the soft hands. It's not because they jumped in a canoe at 4 years old and stuck with it. It's because they, of course, that's part of it. But actually, I know both of them started later. And that's all the transferable skills that they had once they finally got in the canoe and fell in love with that sport. And there's many examples of that. Yeah, I think you and I have talked about Steve Nash as one of the very best examples.
Yeah, Steve and his brother, who switched sports in high school and end up being pro with the opposite sports.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Steve Nash was Major League Baseball. The Cardinals said he could be their next shortstop. He turned down that opportunity. It's ludicrous. 6'2" white guy from Canada says, "No, I want to play basketball." Everybody laughed at him. A friend of ours,
and he was good at soccer. He was really good at soccer.
Yeah, and he was really good at baseball. I mean, I guess he can skate and play hockey too. But I mean, at the end of the day, he just didn't play basketball, which of course he was a 2-time MVP. He could have been probably an MVP in any of those leagues if he stuck with it. But very talented individual.
And obviously, he had the famous rainbow flick in the NBA dunk contest to his teammate. Who was it that he rainbowed it to? Either way, showing his. Pardon me.
I was going to say it was Vince Carter, but it
No,
wasn't.
it was his son's. It was his son's teammate. But either way, he really showed those soccer skills. And I think wasn't the first attempt, but it wasn't his fault. He put a perfect rainbow to his teammate who missed the dunk, but then on the second attempt, rainbow was again perfect, and
yeah,
it was, so those skills.
I guess he even played lacrosse. I didn't notice until a couple of weeks ago. Of course, I'm here in California, and we're close to San Diego. Him and Wayne Gretzky own the lacrosse team here, right? It's like, so he's got money invested in lacrosse as well, and he played lacrosse as a kid. So I mean, he might be one of the best international examples of being a multi-sport athlete is not a bad thing. You can still excel at one sport, and you can play a half dozen. So I think what we're doing with FUNSports and providing kids in the inner city an opportunity to at least try 7 or 8, 9, 10 things throughout a calendar year. Because not everybody wants to play basketball. Not everybody wants to play soccer. Some of these kids might want to play golf or paddle, and if we weren't bringing these sports to the kids, they wouldn't have these at least opportunities to try it once or twice or 3 times in their childhood. So, I think we're doing some good work, and it's just awesome to have someone with the same vision as me and you to run with. It's been an awesome couple of years.
It really has, and we allow kids to try multiple sports, which, as both of our stories, led us to being able to then coach sports and give back to the community because we were able to try and excel at them. But not only do we allow kids to try sports, we also try to teach them to be leaders as well. So can you tell us a little bit about the junior coaches and how that has been progressing?
Yeah, sure. So basically, again, I'll go back to Caden and Jade. My nephews are, really the original 2 FUNSports kids, and 4 or 5 kids in their neighborhood. So they played many sports, like we talked about earlier, from ages about 4 to 12, and they kind of narrowed things down to 1 or 2 sports each. All of those kids have now, but they're at that age. They're 13, 14 years old. They're able to do level 1 coaches with like, for example, Tennis Canada or coaching soccer or whatnot. So there's an opportunity for these kids to make money as coaches and become level 1 instructors. So we've been giving them an opportunity to come in and coach with, like you and I have done here over the last little while, and give them not only just the physical skills, because of course they can demo, Caden and Jade and Logan, these kids, Miguel, they can go in right now and they can demo how to catch a baseball, throw a baseball, a football, basketball, soccer. And they can demo at least 8 to 10 different sports, which is part of being an instructor or coach. But now we're actually giving them the communication skills to talk to the kids and actually become coaches. And it's exciting. It's really cool to see a 14, 13-year-old kid from the same community, predominantly Black community, a kid like Caden and Jaden showing kids how to play tennis or golf, which are traditionally not sports that you see in Mulgrave Park or any inner city kid or any inner city really in North America for that matter, whether you be in Pittsburgh, Yellowknife, Boston, or New York, kids are not usually playing tennis in the inner city or swinging golf clubs or lacrosse sticks. So the fact that we have a generation of teenagers right now in the North End that can do, say, the non-traditional inner city sports and show kids just 3 and 4 and 5 years younger than them, hey, listen, it's cool to play ice hockey,
Yeah.
right? Or, you know, uh, and there are people that look like you that are paddling and golfing and playing tennis and ice hockey, and you're just literally a few grades ahead of them in school. So, you're creating mentors and coaches with teenage kids for kids that are 8, 9, 10 years old, and it, for you and I, we're actually watching it in real time. Like, it's kind of, I don't think there's a lot of this going on elsewhere. And we go to Lake Binook this year, and you got a half dozen kids from Mulgrave Park or North Preston, and they're learning to paddle. And the 14-year-olds are showing the 10-year-olds how to paddle. It's pretty cool. I mean, for
Very
me,
much so.
it's kind of going, okay, yeah, we're still a relatively new organization. I guess we're only hitting our 5-year anniversary in June. But to see that we've actually got that far, that we have junior coaches right now that are mentoring kids that are just a half dozen years younger than them, or 2 and 3 years younger than them, I guess in some cases, it's probably been the most rewarding thing of all, to be honest, of the whole thing. Just watching all that, and we're going to continue to watch it. We're just getting started. It's awesome.
Definitely, and it's so wholesome, seeing not only Jaden and Caden and these older kids helping the younger kids, but it's also great seeing it really benefit the older kids as well. Like, we've seen Jaden and Caden really come out of their shell because they're both very introverted kids. They excel at a number of sports. They're really elite in almost every sport they play. But some of those skills that they lack are the communication skills, those leadership skills, and we've seen them develop by them being able to have a chance to also lead. We're not always the one leading the programs, and it's really, I think, important for anybody who's a coach who's working with youth to give youth the opportunities to lead as well, and not just the captains of your team or whatever, but give opportunities for all of the team members to lead a session, to lead a warm-up, to lead an exercise, to see what ones have that capacity to not only play the sport, but maybe continue as coaches in the sport, or even just those secondary leaders on the field, because as coaches, you need those leaders on the field. You can't be the only one on the sideline, yelling the whole time or whatever. Those guys or girls who are on the fields with them sometimes make a bigger impact than you as a coach.
100%. And I think you and I have talked about this before. Is you and I and a lot of mentors to kids, we use sport as a vehicle to communicate with kids. It's not all X's and O's and how to kick a ball or swing a tennis racket or take a slap shot. There's life skills that you're learning in these practices and training sessions, and just being all together and work as a team. So, we're doing a lot more than teaching kids how to play sports at the end of the day, and especially when you have the diversity of, a 52-year-old white guy from central Newfoundland and a guy that came from a refugee camp in Kenya. It's, they're just learning. We're seeing a lot of diversity just in that. So it's, and more people we bring in for them to meet. It's just creates for a better society at the end of the day.
Definitely, I completely agree, Dave, and it's also great having this partnership where me as a black male, where the kids see me and they're like, he looks like one of us, and then also having you who doesn't look like them, but also shows that, like, there are those people who are white who can actually support you. Not everyone's evil, not everyone's bad or whatever, because I think there's so many of these kids who they see white men and they're scared, and I think it's been really important having you there to really break that stigma down. And the last camp that I did when you were away, as I was telling you, a bunch of the kids were, "Where's Coach Dave?" They missed you. They're like, "Where is he?" And
yeah, that makes me feel great. It really does, because you're quadruple their age, right? At least, right? And I don't look like them, and yeah, so It's awesome because basically we're kind of breaking barriers down the other way because there's no doubt that a lot of older white men are not looked at as allies in society today when it comes to diversity. Some people think, okay, we're just trying to hang on to that last little bit of power that we've had over generations and decades and centuries, I guess. But at the end of the day, society needs everybody involved in this movement, no matter what you look like and your age and your race or your beliefs. Things just work better when everybody's working together as a team, and it's cool to see that the kids, recognize that I'm an ally of theirs, even though I look completely different and I'm a lot older. So it's, there, in my opinion, there's a big role for white males to play when it comes to the diversity. A lot of people think, well, what are we going to do? But at the end of the day, I think we can do a lot. It's just has to be done correctly.
Exactly. I mean, everything you've done today are examples of things you can do, or everything you've talked about today. Creating programs for come try programs, whether it's paddling, tennis, you name it. Because that's ultimately what the point of this whole conversation is you as coaches listening to this. There's many things you can do as a white male, a white female, whatever, to be allies and to create space for those youth. Exactly. But one thing that I want to end with, and we always try to end with each episode, is what is one piece of advice you want to give to other coaches who are listening to this podcast, Dave?
The kids got to have fun. Right? I know that I have an organization called FUNSports, but I've been at Olympic meetings, national meetings, NHL meetings, and NHL is kind of a little different. It's pro sport. But at the end of the day, no matter what you're doing, whether it be with 4-year-old kids or pickleball with 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, if the training sessions and the games and everything that you're doing, if there's not an element of fun, why are we doing it? Like, it's a privilege to be in sports and work in sports, whether you be getting paid like I do, or you're a volunteer soccer coach, or whatever level it is. If the kids are having stress, your athletes and your assistant coaches and the parents, and they're not looking forward to it, like you gave examples of how you had issues as a kid because of bullying and racism. They just got to have fun. And if kids are having fun and participants are having fun, and even here at the national level, it's an element of it, or they're not going to want to participate, and they're not going to get to they're not going to achieve their goals. They're not going to get to that next level, and they're going to back out of sport. They're going to quit sport. They're going to have they're going to have a bad taste in their mouth because of sports. So, I've talked about this before, like I said, in meetings, and it's something that we're really trying to incorporate in the Canoe Kayak in Canada, and anything that involves with this. There has to be at least an element of enjoyment, right? It just can't be it can't be serious sports all day, all the time, no matter what level you're at. So that's my piece of advice is to make sure you're having fun as a coach, and just as importantly, if not more importantly, make sure that the people that you're coaching are having fun as well. Or why are you doing that?
It's a great point, Dave. And, the reason sport was a safe space for me is because it was the one place where I could just have fun and not focus about all those other parts of life. So great bit of advice. And I want to thank you for coming on as a guest, even when you're, all the way across the continent in California, taking the time out of your busy day. And for everyone else, thanks for listening to Coach's Idea. Our next episode will feature Nicole Kuzmich and Simon Taylor, who will be discussing the correlation between mental health and physical health and the importance of safe sport for all coaches as well. Please give us 5 stars if you enjoyed the podcast. And once again, thanks to Dave for joining me. And until next time, keep those ideas in mind.
It was a privilege. Thank you, Marvin.
Even if I gotta do it to a sensitive time, I feel too much pain, yeah. So I'ma bring change, yeah.